Today I thought I'd talk about a food product that's very popular, either as a snack in between meals or even as snacks before a braai when you have people over, and that is crackers or biscuits. So it can also be very overwhelming if you go to Pick n Pay or Woolies and you go to the cracker aisle and you see all the different products and brands, and it can be very difficult to decide which one to choose and to know what is a portion size at the end of the day. So I thought today I'd take you through a few things that you need to keep in mind, and it's a few tips and tricks to look out for when you are choosing your crackers. So let's jump in. So I have a box of two different crackers here just for example purposes. But the very first thing I do for crackers, but food in general that is in packaging, is to look at the ingredient list. Now the ingredient list is super important because it tells you exactly what's in the product. And that is the first step to everything, I would say, when it comes to packaging. I always look at the ingredients and decide whether it's something I want to put in my body. So in this cracker's case, there's golden flax seeds, sunflower seeds, pumpkin seeds, psyllium husk, rosemary, rock salt, and rosemary extract. So what's nice about this is it's quite a short ingredients list, which is already great because there's not a lot of other stuff in it. And then majority of this is basically just foods or seeds really. And that's awesome. We want to try and go for as natural as possible, as minimally processed as possible. So remember also, I think we've mentioned this in previous videos, is that the ingredients list is actually listed from the product or the ingredient that is the majority of the product to the least. So golden flax seeds would then be this product's the biggest component of this cracker. And then if something like sugar or salt or white wheat flour, for example, is the very first ingredient, you know that is what the majority of the product is made up of. And then you can decide whether you want to really buy that cracker or maybe choose an alternative. The second thing you can look out for is definitely the nutritional information. Now, this can be a little bit overwhelming, but you need to look at two things, the per 100 grams and then the per serving. The per serving usually tells you per cracker or per two crackers. It usually says it on the box. Now, what's very important is the first thing I look at is the dietary fiber content. So dietary fiber is super important. It prevents constipation, it actually manages blood cholesterol levels quite well, and it also helps with blood sugar stabilization, which helps with weight loss. So it's a very good thing to have, and we need to have a sufficient amount of fiber every single day. Yes, fruits and veggies do contain fiber, but whole grain carbs actually have a lot more fiber in it. So if you look at this product, for example, we see per 100 gram, it has 25.9 grams of dietary fiber, which is a lot. That's awesome. We usually want to aim for above 6 grams per 100 grams of this product, or a product typically. So 25.9 grams is a lot. So if we look at Salty Cracks, which is a very popular cracker, we can see that per 100 grams, there is 2.7 grams of fiber in this product, which isn't great. It's not a very high fiber product, so it wouldn't be my first choice necessarily. Now, the next thing you can think of when you do buy a cracker and to look out for is typically the carbohydrate content of the cracker. Now, this is going to give you a guide as to your portion size as well. So we always, like to compare one portion of carbohydrates to one slice of bread, because that's equivalent to about 15 grams of carbohydrates. So one slice of bread contains 15 grams of carbohydrates. So does 3 baby potatoes, and so does half a cup of cooked oats, and so forth. So that's a nice general rule of thumb, is that one portion of carbohydrates is equivalent to 15 grams of carbs, or one portion of starch is 15 grams of carbs. So if we look at the Salty Cracks, for example, we see that serving size here, 2 biscuits, will give us 8 grams of carbohydrates. So typically, if we wanted to have a portion of starch in the form of the Salty Crack, it would be 4 Salty Cracks, because then it would give us about 16 grams of carbohydrates, which is just a little bit more, 1 gram more than a portion. So that would be 4 Salty Cracks. That would be also the equivalent to 3 Provitas, for example. Now, the other thing also to look at is the fat content, because now, for example, Salty Cracks might have a higher fat content than something like a rice cake, for example. So we first look at the carbohydrates, and then we can also look at the fat content. So if you look at the fat content of the Salty Cracks, we see that it has 3 grams of fat per 2 biscuits. Now, if we look at a fat portion, that's usually 5 grams. So that would be, for example, 1 slice of bread with a teaspoon of butter on it. If you were to try and swap 1 slice of bread with a teaspoon of butter with Salty Cracks, that would be about 4 salty cracks. So that would be just plain with no toppings. That would be equivalent to 1 carbohydrate and 1 fat portion. So it is important to look at the fat content as well as the carbohydrate content. The protein content of crackers are usually quite low. I mean, in this case, it's 1.4 grams. So it's not really something we really need to look at. So I recommend you look at the carbohydrates and also at the fat content. So what I do recommend is go for a cracker that has a very low fat content, because then at least you can add something like avo or something like cottage cheese or something to that cracker, because it's not, the fat isn't actually worked into the cracker as of yet. So that's what I would recommend. So definitely look at the dietary fiber, the carbohydrates, and as also the fat. Now, for example, this cracker, this is a very different cracker. This is if we look at the carbohydrate content per 15 grams of serving, which is 1 cracker, it has 0.4 grams of carbohydrates, and fat, it has 1.6 grams of carbs, which is very little, and protein about 3. So this is a bit higher in protein and very low in carbs, and a bit higher in fat because it's mainly made of seeds. So this would typically be a nice snack for someone that's on a low carbohydrate diet, or maybe wanting to go a little bit more keto or banting specifically. But yeah, it's also a gluten-free option, and the nice thing about this is really that it's super high in fiber. So if you need a fiber hit, this is a good place to go. But it is also very important to look at the portion size here, because of the fact that it does still contain calories, proteins and fats, even though it is lower in carbohydrates. So my recommendation would be to really just take your time when you are going to go shop for a cracker and compare brands, compare different crackers within brands, like compare the rye version to the multigrain version of Provitas, for example, and choose the one that you can see you're going to get the best bang for your buck, and also the most fiber with the least amount of extra additives that you actually don't need. I hope this has been helpful. Let us know if you have any questions, and I hope you have a wonderful weekend.